Whether you are a new improviser, an experienced jazz musician, or somewhere in between, rhythm changes is something you eventually need to deal with. And after this video, I hope you are less intimidated, more excited, and filled with new ideas and inspiration. So let's start with the absolute basics, and we are actually going to throw all those scary chords out the window, and we will instead focus on rhythm-based, riff-like lines. So we are in B-flat major. That's the key you will almost always play rhythm changes tune. And let's analyze the tune that started it all, I Got Rhythm. And using those notes as a foundation, we have a B-flat major pentatonic scale. The same thing if we listen to the beginning of Cottontail. And also, maybe the best example, Lester Leaps In. And that is the kind of riff-based motifs we are after. So let me come up with some examples. Pretty nice, right? You know, the chords are still going in the background, but we don't care about them. If we just manage to swing with these riffs, it will sound great. You can also stay on one of the notes longer than the others. And even if the root, the B-flat, is the most natural place to start at, try out some of the other notes as well. Almost gives it a J.J. Johnson-esque sound, right? Okay, so we are riffing along nicely, but we miss a little bit of an edge. So let's listen to the song 7 Come 11. It's almost a rhythm changes tune. The B section is just a little bit different. So did you catch it? Well, it's an added D flat. And you usually use it either as a chromatic approach note to the D, or together with the C to get the more bluesy sound. So it could sound something like this. Or maybe just play around with it a lot and see what you can come up with. Maybe play along with the old recordings, bassy or other hard swinging recordings. Now we are going to throw the blues scale into the mix. And if you feel like this is too much already, forget about it. Just work with what you have so far, and maybe you can add it in later down the road. But for most of you, you're already familiar with the blues scale, especially in B flat, so maybe this will actually make it easier. So a blues scale riff can sound something like this. And then, of course, mix it all together at your pleasure. Alright, what to do with the dreaded B section? So either you, for now, tell the piano player or guitar player, you play all the B sections, I play the A sections, or we continue with the one-note riff ideas and just play the roots. So the chords in the B section are D7, G7, C7, F7. So we can play something like this. It can swing really hard with just one note per chord. Now we are gently going to introduce some chords. So we are in B flat major and we'll keep the first and the third bar just B flat major chords, and the second and the fourth bar will become dominant chords. So if we think B flat 6, F7, B flat 6, F7, and then back to B flat again, we can easily create some simple, nice sounding lines. Or maybe just or upwards. Miles Davis plays something similar in his opening line in O Leo with Sonny Rollins. Simple and beautiful. Or do something like this. So there I first play the B flat major 7 arpeggio and then added the chromatic passing note from the F7 bebop scale and then ended off with a classic mean to me quote. So if you don't know about the bebop scales, when you have a dominant chord, you add the chromatic passing note between the root and the flat 7. So on an F7 chord, it's F, E, E flat. And you mostly do it downwards. And this is a super common cell using the bebop scale. Another nice pattern you can try out uses these guide tones. And then you fill them in with, for instance, JJ sometimes plays this pattern. So nice. Now in the fifth bar, the B flat chord turns into a B flat 7, which leads to an E flat major chord in the sixth bar, and from there back to the B flat major chord again in the seventh bar, and then an F7 chord again in the eighth bar to lead back nicely into B flat major again. In the fifth bar, we can now take the opportunity to play the B flat 7 bebop scale. So you might have seen that it's usually two chords in the sixth bar. You have the E flat major chord and then something else. And there are a few options, but I think we should not worry about that in this level 2, because the E flat major chord itself leads back nicely into B flat. And if you want to, you can also add a bit of blues flavor as we did in level 1, and that will be enough to play a really solid solo. Alright, the second A section is the same as the first. We just skip the last F7 because we're not going back to B flat, but into the B section. And there we have the 4 dominant chords starting on D7. So just getting familiar with the arpeggios is a great start. And then get familiar with the scales. So they are all Mixolydian scales to begin with. So it's just major scales, but you lower the 7th. And I would start straight away adding the bebop scale going downwards, because it's just an instant bebop flavor. Now this next step is optional. You don't have to do this, but for me it's actually easier. So whenever I see a dominant chord, especially if it lasts more than 1 bar, I kind of automatically add the minor 2 chord. So in the B section, I often think A minor to D7, D minor to G7, G minor to C7, C minor to F7, because it's so much easier to come up with lines. Let me give you an example. I added a bit of extra chromaticism in there, but mainly it's just 2 5s. And if you want to simplify it a bit, you can play around with this idea. D7 to D minor 7, C7 to C minor 7. So if you get comfortable with the chords and the scales we have talked about so far in the video, and you mix in elements from the first level as well, you will be able to play a great solo. So now we are really getting into the nitty-gritty. I need to take this off, I can't see anything. So the first half of the A section consists of 2 turnarounds. In the first bar, you can often see it says B flat major to G minor 7, but unless you are playing a strict chart, maybe with backgrounds and stuff, when it sounds better to play the exact chords, you can have a lot of freedom and just think of them as turnarounds. My go-to progression, for instance, is D minor 7, G7 flat 9, C minor 7 to F7 something. And of course it gets a bit repetitive to spell out the chords in the turnarounds all the time. So I suggest mixing in some elements from the first and the second level from this video. And I'll also show you 2 other variations in a moment. But first let's move on to the 5th and the 6th bar. There you have the B flat dominant chord, or as I usually see it, F minor 7 to B flat 7. It leads to the E flat major chord, and then in the other half you have 2 common options. The first one is an E diminished chord, similar to what you can do when playing a blues. And if it's easier for you, you can also think of it as an E flat dominant chord with a flat 9. And you can also spell the whole diminished arpeggio, pretty nice. The other option is to turn the E flat major into an E flat minor, or it's sometimes written out as A flat 7 instead, but for me it's easier to come up with lines thinking E flat minor, or something like. Now in the 7th and 8th bar you play another turnaround, just to lead back nicely into the second A section. And when you come to the 7th and 8th bar the second time, you can just either rest on B flat major, or maybe play something like C minor 7, F7, and then B flat major. Let your imagination decide. Let's go back to those variations I mentioned earlier. One nice chromatic line you sometimes hear is this one. And that comes from a chromatic progression upwards. So if you think B flat major, B diminished, C minor, C sharp diminished, and then back to D minor again. Pretty nice, right? You can hear this on jazz recordings now and then. Another way of thinking of the same chords are B flat major or D minor, whichever you choose, G7 flat 9, C minor, A7 flat 9, and then back to D minor. The other variation is a row of dominants. So if we think of the B flat 7 in the 5th bar as the target chord, and we start counting backwards, you know, the dominant to B flat is F7, the dominant to F7 is C7, and so on. And we do that all the way back to bar 1. Then we start on F sharp 7. So a common pattern you hear, and a great way actually to practice these chords, are 3, 5, 1, 7 of each chord, like this. Another common pattern is to play 1, 7 of the first chord, and then 3, 1 of the next chord, and then you alternate, so it sounds like this. Great when playing in faster tempos. So then you get acquainted to these chords, you find your own favorite patterns, and then eventually actually start improvising over these chords. If you're not playing an arrangement where it's already decided when to play these chords, you do it randomly on a jam session, for instance, I recommend being very clear the first time. Then the rhythm section will understand, oh, we're doing that now. And in my experience, you keep these chords for the whole chorus. This is what JJ played over his tune Turnpike. But a lot faster. Also notice how he balances these fast-moving chords with more grounded, bluesy phrases. So the B section, it's not much more to say really. Listen to a lot of recordings and transcribe what you like. That's my advice. Maybe one nice thing you can do now and then is to move a motif chromatically downwards. And if you have fun, cool ideas of what to do during the B section, let us know in the comments. I guess I have to change back to these for the outro. Next up, check out this video. It's pretty good. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.